Oh, good evening, everyone. How are you? I'm going to take this off. I'm Ken Tate. I'm the Director of Engagement and External Relations for the Department of Computer Science. It's my honor to welcome all of you here. Okay, so this is the LabCorp Leadership and Technology Speaker Series. Everybody in the right place, right? Okay. We have been doing this. It was named the Fidelity Investment Series for about 13 years, and thankful for the folks at LabCorp who have stepped up with a 3-year commitment. It's now the LabCorp Series. We've had about 80 speakers, and I'm often have been asked, how do you identify these speakers? Where do they come from? You know, and the short answer is everywhere, right? I'm inspired by people that I meet, by people I read about, and sometimes I get recommendations from students or faculty. So they really do come from all over. Our speaker tonight I identified by reading an article in an alumni magazine, and I was so intrigued with this story, and I think you're going to be very intrigued with this story. Obviously, so many people are here, and we'll check later on to see how many people are online, but I think you're really, really going to enjoy this presentation tonight. A couple of announcements. Now would be a great time to silence the cell phones or anything that might be a distraction, and also know that we are not only videotaping this, we're live streaming it. Before you shut your phone down or silence it, if you want to tell somebody about it, now would be the time. There's a link on our computer science website that will take them to the live stream. So, again, welcome. We try to have lots of different topics. Tonight, we're going to be talking about what you might be able to do and the doors that might open when you have a degree in computer science and a passion. So, I'm going to turn it over at this time to our department head, Dr. Greg Rothermel, who will make the official introduction. Thank you, Greg.
Thank you, Ken. And I want to echo Ken's comments and thank our sponsor, LabCorp, for sponsoring this series and the whole set of talks we've been doing this year, and hopefully to come in the future years. Anyway, tonight we're honored to welcome Scott Addison Clay as our guest speaker. Scott is the founder and CEO of Addison Interactive, a digital marketing agency celebrating its 11th year. And he's the recent founder and CEO of Eventual Incorporated, a software development company powering immersive experiences and virtual events. Scott leads an international team of developers, designers, writers, and strategists working on immersive digital experiences, marketing campaigns, and virtual events for some of Hollywood's biggest names, such as Harry Potter, Batman, The Hobbit, Lego, Godzilla, Prince, Katy Perry, 20th Century Fox, and Warner Brothers, and Fortune 500 brands such as Amazon, Microsoft, Netflix, Adobe, Mattel, and Disney. Wow. Scott graduated with honors from NC State with a degree in environmental engineering and minors in theater and art studies with a concentration in film. But from what I've heard, he has some significant coding skills as well. He was featured in the summer 2021 NC State Alumni Magazine. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming our very special guest speaker tonight, Mr. Scott Addison Clay.
Thank you so much. Thank you, everybody. All right, so I guess Greg did this slide, so I don't really have to do that, but I think we'll just move on in. Thank you so much for coming and being here today. Yes, Ken and I created a formula for success. It's here. It's creative passion plus technical curiosity, specifically in computer science, will really be able to lead you anywhere. These are, as Greg was saying, some of the companies we work with. There's some more here. In addition to this list, I've been fortunate enough to work on over 100 movie and TV marketing campaigns. We built the first tournament engine for Riot Games' League of Legends. Helped take Mitsubishi cars from number 53 on the J.D. Power list of car websites out of 56 to number 3 in 3 months. So just a few random stories before we get into all the real fun stuff. Being in Hollywood, I have really fun neighbors. So Christopher Nolan is a director. Many of you probably know who he is. He's directed this series called The Dark Knight. Inception, Dunkirk, Tenet recently. His wife, Emma Thomas, is his producer, but little known facts about them. I didn't know he was our neighbor. I just knew there was a neighbor who had chickens because my daughter wanted to go meet the chickens that lived a block away from us. And we'd always go, and then ultimately found out during a film shoot at our house for a movie called Halloween that the chickens belonged to Christopher Nolan. Later, we started going to bake sales at their house because they would take the eggs from those chickens and have bake sales. So just to demystify some of Hollywood, they're normal people. Like, they're actually normal people and really fun. The other cool thing is I got to work on multiple films of his even before I met him. So we built a really cool thing for The Dark Knight Rises where you could put yourself in the poster of The Dark Knight, and that became a collector's item. We built this thing for Inception called Mobile Architect, where if you remember that movie, if you've seen it, the world folds over, and we actually used Google Maps and your GPS location and some obscuring imagery to fold the world over you. That Mustang is actually my developer's car. It's in front of our old office. That's on the official App Store. Another fun neighbor, Bob Odenkirk. He's Better Call Saul. You might have seen the show. Some fun facts. I went to City Hall and tried to argue in a court against him, which was a really dumb thing to do, I think, because he plays a lawyer on TV. And he was actually really good at it, and we totally lost the case. It was fine. We're still really good friends. And our cat Little goes into their yard quite a lot, so that's a lot of fun. And I got to work on his website, bobanddavid.com. So we have fun work time and play time together. This guy, Brad Pitt, he lives a couple blocks away. Turns out we have the same jeans, Raleigh Denim. He actually has 17 pairs of Raleigh Denim. You guys might know that company. It's here in Raleigh. Also, it turns out he adopted our turtle. So we have a turtle named Turtle the Turtle, really creative name, and we needed a place for it to go because our house was not quite great. The local pet shop owner put it in a little stream in his backyard, and Brad's kids found it and adopted it and just took it away. So we're like, wait, our turtle is now living a better life than we are. This is great. And we got to work on Once Upon a Time in Hollywood and make a lot of content with Brad. So it's truly a fun existence and kind of surreal sometimes, but they're all normal people, I promise. Eventual and Addison Interactive, two companies I've been fortunate enough to create over the years. I'm going to show you, just to give you a better picture of what we do, a little sizzle reel that focuses on both companies at once. Let's see if this works. Yes.
Let's begin.
So now I'm going to throw it over to you all, but now you have a sense of this wide range of stuff that I get to do on a daily basis, which is a lot of fun. But I didn't think I would be doing this 20 years ago. But I'd like to hear from some of you all about why you got into computer science. And we can do this easily just with a show of hands. Here are some areas. I kind of made up the categories, but you can just look at these lists and think about why you might have gone in to the computer science department. Show of hands, anything in the mechanical area? Who went into things for that's 2 people, that's it. More of you, I'm sure, like robotics. No? All right, 3, okay. Graphical, VR, AR, metaverse stuff. Okay, cool. That's kind of going towards my lane. Informational, cybersecurity, AI. There you go, okay. So I was just building up to the big winner, great. This is what computer science looked like when I started. This guy named Corey Haim, super cool, but very small Atari 1200 XL and a television. Like that was the world that I was super excited about. I saw Ken showed me outside some collector's items that are from this era. This is me on the left. I didn't have the facial hair or the glasses back then. But that was my computer on the right and the TV that was connected to it. I was so excited to get this and be able to create things out of pixels and words that could tell stories. This is a game from the past called Zork, and it was a choose your own adventure style game that you got to put in inputs and the story unfolded for you. This was like the be-all end-all at that time for me, where I could tell stories that centered around the user, and the user of that software could then help dictate what actually happened in that world. I got so excited that I started teaching myself BASIC on my Atari 1200 XL, and ultimately wrote my first video game, which was a text-based choose your own adventure game, way back at the age of 8 years old. This world just fascinated me. What fascinates you? Anybody have something to share? I'm going to now put you on the spot. Anybody have something to share that fascinates them about computer science, the world, anything? Nothing? You're bored to tears by everything in life? Yeah, okay. I understand. It's all right. We don't have to be sharing just yet. We'll see as we get into it. For me, I love taking things apart and figuring out how they worked. This was an actual racing game that I took it apart to try to figure out how it worked, and figured out it was electromagnets that spun really quickly with an electrical source of power to turn the axles of those little cars and make them go super fast. And the amount of voltage and current that went into the car sometimes would cause it to careen off the tracks, which was super exciting. But ultimately, my cars did not look like that because they just were down to the mechanical parts underneath them. I love doing that. I ended up taking apart our television, our family television, a Sony Trinitron, for a science fair project. My mother was super upset because I couldn't put it back together once I had taken it apart. But I learned how a CRT worked and actually made pixels have color and the intricacies of how graphics actually function. From there, I just started getting into really how do things work, how do you design things, how do you build things out of physical objects or code or electricity. This just became a huge curiosity for me. It then led to other areas, and I took that same creative passion of mine to how does music work, how do video games work, how do cathedrals work, how does comedy work, how does language work, how do relationships work, how do I work, how do people work, and I was just fascinated by all these things, and I couldn't get enough of that. Jumping forward, I made a beautiful, really clear pie chart for my team at Addison Interactive. Once we formed our company, we started working with these big entities, and like Warner Brothers, Fox, and Sony. And I don't think we could assume that we, just because we understood tech and creative, could understand how these big businesses worked and what their motivations were and how they operated, because they were sort of these monoliths that you just couldn't understand. So I'm going to translate this right here because I probably can't read my words, but I drew this chart of things you know, that's the blue, things you know that you don't know, and things you know you need to figure out, that's that dark blue. And then there's the things you don't know that you don't know. And that's the majority of things, right? Like we just can't know everything, but we can be curious about those things. And that curiosity really motivated me. So what motivates you? This is an even harder question, so I'm not going to make you answer it, but I just want you to think about it and think about what motivates you. It's a big world out there, and as we learned, the universe of tech now, with all those things we had listed out that you raised your hand about, didn't exist in 1982 when I started coding, and that technology just keeps expanding. So how do you figure out what you want to do and what you want to do in the future throughout your career? Also, if you understand, and this is about leadership and technology, if you understand what motivates other people around you, then you're going to be able to help everybody that you work with bring their best selves to work and make the best things. Because if you are all motivated to build something together and go in the same direction, you're going to produce great things with those people that you're working with. For me, this question about what motivates me, it took me many years to answer. So as you already know, I was motivated by figuring out the essence of things, how things really worked, especially around computers and engineering. Non sequitur, but my dad owned a donut shop in Raleigh called Donuts Delight in the 80s until frozen yogurt came in and just destroyed donuts. He would take me on delivery runs here to NC State, not here because this was a lake and woods at the time, but to the old campus, as well as to IBM. And it was really cool with my fascination with computers and engineering and architecture to go into those places and see how they operated as a teenager. And it was a lot because of that time that I applied here to NC State. Okay, so we're going to talk about some interests that I pursued over the years. This is where technical curiosity plus creative passion can lead you in a lot of different directions. When I started at NC State, the world felt like my oyster. I wanted to eat it up. I was in the Scholars Program, and is the Scholars Program still around? Is anybody in the Scholars Program?
It's unusual because usually we have a lot.
Yeah. Well, maybe people on Zoom are in the Scholars Program. The Scholars Program is great because it forces you to take classes outside of engineering. And that creative itch that I had really was satisfied by a lot of those classes in Tompkins, Caldwell, Winston. So now I'm going to hop around a little bit in time because I'm going to show you some different topics that I toured along my circuitous journey from that little boy picture to today. But I promise by the time we get to the end, it's all going to make sense. And I think will help illuminate some pathways for you all as well. So engineering, clearly figuring how things work, problem solving was key and core. So I started in aerospace engineering until I got to nuclear physics. And nuclear physics is actually kind of hard. So then I pivoted to environmental engineering because like this lady here, I think the planet is pretty cool and we want to save it. She's got a planet on her sweatshirts. And I think the key tenet of engineering is problem solving and building things with a set of givens with technical constraints. And I think if you understand that, you can really understand and figure out any problem. And that's been core to everything I've done since then. So I think engineering has just been an amazing thing to have at the core of what I do. And then acting, obviously. So that's maybe the next general step you would take, right? So I started doing improv at NC State, and I tried out for my first play, this musical called Anything Goes at Thompson Theater, and I happened to land the starring role. And then several roles, classes, and years later, I moved to New York to actually pursue this. In the first year, I ended up getting 3 agents. I was in dozens of plays, films, commercials, magazines, and it made no sense with my engineering degree, and they were completely separate worlds. My friend groups were totally separate. But I think through acting, I really learned about listening, communicating, understanding, and responding from a source of truth of yourself. And then also learning what it's like to be in somebody else's shoes. I think that's a huge thing that has stood me well through the test of time. And then art and design. So Ken and I were just talking that his daughter went to School of Design. I really wanted to be in the School of Design. I wanted to do architecture here at the School of Design, but I didn't quite make it. Nonetheless, I had several friends from Inlow High School who were in that school, so I would just go to the studio and hang out there and try to learn as much as I could by just being around great design. After my sophomore year, I went to Oxford University in England, where I was able to study art history and Shakespeare, which combined 2 of these things in one of the most idyllic places for it. But through the years, I've learned user-centric design and high-quality design in software particularly is critical to building really good software and really good experiences. So I think that has served me well as well. Then filmmaking. I heard about Intro to Film, where you could go watch movies and talk about them, and I thought, that's a class? Okay, I'm gonna go do that. That sounds great. So I took several classes with Joe Gomez, and then later in New York, tried my hand at directing and filmmaking, ultimately produced several independent films, and had award-winning shorts that I had directed as well. Besides the combination of cinematography, storytelling, and acting, I learned the complexity of logistics, of budgeting, and motivating a group of people to come together to create something that was artistic, but also very technical to build and create at one time, because you have to coordinate all the film AV people, and has a goal of commercial success. So this was another interesting thing. And then coding. You guys might know something about coding. As you could tell from my bright-eyed self next to my Atari 1200 XL, I saw coding as magic. I thought this is amazing if you can create these experiences with code. Here at State, I studied Fortran 66, Unix, wrote application code in Liaison. Does Liaison still exist? Do people have computers there? I don't know. It still exists, all right. Learned complex formulas with Excel and started diving into web languages in the 90s, HTML, CSS, JavaScript, PHP. In an early collision of worlds, this was kind of crazy. I was doing commercials and reading the news at WKNC 88.1, where the sum of our digits is 17. What? That's crazy. Which was a liner that lasted for over a decade and was played at WKNC. Crazy. But from doing that, I was referred to a software company in Raleigh to do voiceover for games and applications, and ended up randomly doing the voice for training software for Apple, for Microsoft, for Oracle, all about networking and the future of the internet. So it was strangely through my acting work that I got to basically have classes about networking, because I was doing the voices for the software company. Later ended up meeting somebody there who was an illustrator. He was animating his illustrations on a computer using something called Flash. And I was like, oh my gosh. So you're combining visuals with code and you're making a cool experience that's interactive. This was like a whole new world for me, and just blew my mind. So you never know where things are gonna lead, and that was one of the first intersections that was a pretty amazing thing when you're open to opportunities. And later I went on to teach 13 different courses for Adobe and Apple in those very subjects around Flash and filmmaking. Music. So coming from a musical family, my parents met in the church choir. I was adept at guitar, singing, some piano. And after I joined two other guys on the breezeway at Sullivan Hall, we were asked by a woman named Alana Kurtz to play at something she was setting up at Sullivan and then Burgaw called Coffee Shack. And then we formed a band called Three Guys Doing a Favor for Alana, which was a great, I think still a great band name. And we ended up performing a lot of shows there. Every show, we would play a Pearl Jam song. I was the lead singer and guitarist, or one of the guitarists. Ultimately, we played at a talent show at Tally Student Union and won Best All-Around Act. Kyler England was a friend who also played in that show. She later became, or was awarded singer-songwriter of North Carolina. We ended up living together with her husband. They went to Berklee College of Music in New York, and I moved out to LA with them, and she was featured in the article that Ken read. I bring this up because it's crazy that her husband, Richard Furch, and I are now best of friends. He's an engineer as well, a music engineer. And one time asked me if I could make things move on the internet. He's from Germany. And I said yes, and then he said, Prince wants to meet you. And I was like, what? I'll tell you more about that in a minute. Okay, so sales. So after freshman year, I saw a flyer for a company called Southwestern at the Student Center. They sold books to help kids from kindergarten through high school, written by teachers across America familiar with the nation's curriculum. I had happened to be a top magazine salesperson in middle school, ran the sales floor at a sports card shop, worked with my parents in their businesses. So I did it. It was extremely tough. Selling books door to door is a really hard thing to do. I did it in Illinois, but I believed in that product, and I came to believe in myself through that process. It ended up in the top 10% of the company in my first year. I think when you can understand people and give them something that is of value to them, that's really the core of sales. Events. So after graduation, when I moved to New York, I ended up needing money somehow, so I ended up working in events. I helped put on some events, including some ice dancing shows at Rockefeller Center, several off-Broadway plays, catering fancy events with fancy people, and I'll speak a little bit later about how this came into play once the pandemic hit and events went digital. So now you're starting to see this is a little bit crazy, right? Like this doesn't make any sense. None of these things really work together, but having a penchant for design and filmmaking and engineering and coding, people started needing their creative work marketed. I was working with a lot of people in New York, I'll skip to New York time, who were creating cool things and they needed to get the word out about them. I happened to be able to design and build websites. I could design flyers, posters. So I started getting into marketing. And marketing is really understanding an audience, knowing what they need, and then being able to distill a story about something that you want them to engage with. So I was able to start doing that and building these websites for different people. It's really another form of storytelling. So the word started getting out that I could do this, and then it just spread more and more people started asking me. This is in the late 90s, early 2000s. I moved to LA in 2004 and met a fellow Renaissance man named Mark McBride, and we decided to start a business because he was getting the same questions. He was a filmmaker and honestly, the world's top yo-yoist. I'm not making this up. He was sponsored by Duncan Yo-Yos, and he was the godfather of yo. He wrote a book about yo-yo physics. I'm serious. But he's a great guy, and he was getting the same requests, so we formed a company called Lettuce Web You, and we created 60 sites on our platform in under 2 years for a lot of different types of people, artists, companies, other filmmakers. And this was starting to go well, but then I ended up getting scooped up by a large marketing company in Hollywood. At this new company, which was called the Cimarron Group, they had just lost the head of their burgeoning interactive department, and I was brought in to help lead the group. Through this building of this website platform, I had built independentfilm.com. I taught for Adobe, so they said, okay, this guy can come in and help lead this department. What this place was a 200-person operation in Hollywood, the second biggest agency in Hollywood. If you don't know what an agency is, we did stuff for clients and helped make their marketing materials. So in this building were people that did the trailers for movies. They made the posters for films. They made creative content. They made, at the time, DVD menus. The voice of trailers for 20 years came and recorded in our building all the time. And the internet was just starting to take off. And what was crazy was that I was now in this position that combined a lot of these skills, and I was put into a leadership role. And I wasn't sure if I could do it. It was my first full-time job, to be honest. And I wasn't sure if I could even sit in a chair for that long. So again, this is a crazy bunch of stuff, right? It's a hopeless mismatch of skills. In the 80s and 90s, there were very few overlaps between these interests. I had several people tell me, pick a lane. What are you doing? Like, you have to focus on something and do it well. That's the only way you're going to succeed in any of these areas. But I felt compelled to create things that used many of them, incorporated them. And while I had success in several of the areas, I wasn't necessarily amazing at any one of them, and I wasn't ready to choose. So I have another question. Just put this into your brain. What are you prepared for? What skills have you collected thus far? What skills do you want to learn more about to prepare you for something? So after doing all these disparate things and getting my hands dirty in all these areas, a surprising thing happened. So when this opportunity to run the interactive department at the Cimarron Group, I had some experience with a lot of the things those other people did on a day-to-day basis, and they were experts, right? They were experts at making posters. They were experts at working with artists. They knew filmmaking. They knew marketing. They knew creative. They knew AV, but they didn't know the internet. And I was somebody who could come in and knew some of the struggles that they had and some of the things they were trying to create in their creative processes, and was able to help them realize the things they could create that we could put together online in a digital format, and ended up becoming somebody who was relied upon by the people at that company, but also at the movie studios. I started getting introduced to people at Fox, at Warner Brothers, at Sony, and those people, once they understood that I understood what they were trying to do, as well as the internet, had me come in and explain what building cool interactive experiences could be like if we leveraged the talents of all these great artists. And some magical things started falling into place. So a path emerged for me. I may have gotten lucky, but what is luck but an opportunity that you are prepared for? One thing that's just sort of ironic and weird is that I was hired as an actor to play a creative marketing executive in a Super Bowl commercial with Willie Nelson for H&R Block, which I did, and I was also hired to portray a computer hacker for The Mob for Wired magazine. And here I found myself actually being these things in real life. What's not pictured, because I couldn't find a picture of it, but I was also a surfer in an ESPN promo, and now I surf, and I didn't at the time. So just weird little aside. So after 3 years at the Cimarron Group, we'd grown that group from 3 when I got there to 30 people. I found myself increasingly doing admin and management, and I wasn't part of building anything anymore. You remember that thing I told you about the German who asked me to meet Prince? I did. I'll tell you more about that in a minute. But the cool thing was he broke me off a piece of what we had earned, and I was able to take a bit of money and go start my own agency, Addison Interactive. With the relationships that I'd built at the Hollywood studios, we thrived building really cool online experiences, some of which you saw in that sizzle reel, and got to incorporate all these creative aspects. And now I had the ability to incorporate the entrepreneurial, sales, leadership acumen that I'd accumulated in disparate ways before. So amazingly, I was able to put almost all these skills to use. And then fast forward to 2020, when the pandemic happened, I was able to also add events into that as it became a big need to take events from in real life to a digital place. We were actually really well positioned to do that. So again, you never know sometimes what your passions and things you're excited about that you go and learn about, how they will come to fruition later in your career. And all those things combined to form what we like to call the experiential internet. So when you're going on the internet and you have an experience, whether it's some immersive website or it's a cool thing where you're talking with other people face-to-face over video, you're having an experience on the internet. And I think all of these skills have combined to help me understand how best, or a great way to create these experiences. But the kid from 1982 could not even foresee that. But I just pursued the things that I was interested in. Show of hands, do you think you're creative? Okay, some of you, good. I'll tell you, all of you are. So in computer science, you are problem solving. You're creatively problem solving. I think engineering is super creative. It's something that might get overlooked, but there's not one way to build a bridge or to create something that some exec envisions for their software. There's a lot of different ways to do that, and you are creative problem solving every day. I was told by someone, and not even that long ago, that I was just a tech person, that I was not creative. But in running a technology-heavy company, you have to make decisions every day and use creative problem-solving techniques to do that, especially when you're building a product. So now I'll tell you about Prince. This was a super creative process. Prince is was a super creative guy. But it wasn't just the design. He had some really lofty business goals. He was actually a really savvy business person. We had to creatively problem solve how to reach those very lofty, very demanding goals in a super cool way that worked with his style within a very mediocre budget with a lot of pressure. So not only did I work with Prince late into the evenings, during the days I was holding down the fort as the VP of Digital at the Cimarron Group at the same time, while also working with press, publicity, Target, concert venues, other companies, his security people, other musicians, famous people he just wanted me to show the website to, as well as a 14-person creative and development team. The creative process to just figure out how all of that could work was quite daunting, but quite thrilling. So creativity, you've got it and you'll use it. You might be curious, I am the CEO of two companies, a tech company. So what hats does a CEO wear? I'm just gonna give you a brief list. Just a few things that every day I have to creatively figure out where am I gonna put my effort. And there's a lot of things that every day you have to think about and figure out. And to do all of these things, you have to have a wide amount of knowledge and general knowledge and understanding of people and problems. So again, that crazy chart has come in super handy when actually running a company and having to do all these things on a daily basis. Getting towards the end here, I just wanted to impart a question, which is, what will make our lives interesting? As we've been talking about, with the underpinnings of computer science, there are so many places you can go and so many things you can build. There's a lot of talk about convenience and frictionless technology making our lives easier, but what will make our lives more interesting, more fulfilled? How do we increase our fascination with each other, with the world, the universe we look after, so that we're really building things that get us excited? I'm not saying that what we're doing is doing all of that, but one thing that we were excited to do is when the pandemic happened, we could start, because we had so much client demand for it, building these really cool, engaging experiences online. And it became really clear that we needed to connect people. People could not be together in person. So how do we connect them and make their lives more fulfilling, keep that connection going? As we started developing this and COVID started easing, we could come back in person, but we had started getting global audiences and people that had never connected before to connect. So we started trying to figure out, how do we make these engagements really interesting and engaging and entertaining? We all want to be entertained, and we've been trying to do that, a little bit of that with eventual and the experiential internet. At the very end here, what will expand our consciousness? Anybody? No? Not right away? Think about this. I was inspired by listening to a podcast with Elon Musk, hosted by Lex Friedman. And Elon said, "My foundation is that I'm curious about the nature of the universe." That's his foundation. Now you think about what he's doing. He's making rockets, he's making electric vehicles, solar panels. He wants to dig holes in the ground to improve transportation. But his foundation is, I'm curious about the nature of the universe. It doesn't seem exactly related to those things, right? But he wants to expand the scope and scale of humanity in consciousness. And he says this drives everything that he does and all of his decisions. So think about ways you might be making things that can expand our consciousness. He also said, be useful, create more than you consume, and develop broad general knowledge. If you find the overlaps between what you're interested in and what you're good at, you will make great things. And you'll be prepared to accept the opportunities that come your way. And also, when something is important, you do it, even if the odds are not in your favor. If something's important, you do it, even if it's hard. Second to last thing, teamwork makes the dream work. If you can find people that are aligned with you in your vision and your goals, both collectively as a company and personally in terms of your career, you're going to be going in the same direction. You're going to be swimming in the same direction. This is a gift from our website. So we say individually, we're all these things, but we're all like-minded and we all want to build really cool stuff. I've been lucky enough to have a lot of people by my side for a long time, including my wife, Philippa, who is our head of strategy, and our chief operations person has been with me for 6 years. CTO has been with me for 8 years, and we've been aligned and swimming in that same direction. I think one of the amazing things about the time we're in now is that we have collective improvement through shared information and shared innovation, and we're building on top of each other in real time as we see things proliferate on the internet. We have some global rallying cries around climate change, preserving democracy, but being able to leverage this flywheel of information and data, I think will catapult us into entirely new territories that we can't see right now. So do what you're passionate about, learn as much as you can about whatever you're interested in, because who knows how it will all come together in the end. Another fun story. So 20 years ago, this is the last story, I promise. 20 years ago, I was working at a place called the Tribeca Grand Hotel and catering, and Eddie Vedder was staying there, who's the lead singer of Pearl Jam, if you remember from earlier in the music segment. My band played a Pearl Jam song every show we did, and I loved Eddie Vedder. And the person who was in charge of room service said, "Eddie's here and he wants breakfast." And I said, "Oh my God, okay, I'm gonna go." So she let me take up the food to him. He had just gotten in the night before at like 2 a.m. It was at the Tribeca Grand Hotel, which was on 6th Avenue in New York, with the World Trade Center right behind him. This was a couple months before the Trade Center fell. We were on the 7th floor, and I could see it right there. He put himself, because he was always a showman, into some light and just sort of stood there in the light. And I went up to him and I said, "Oh my gosh, I love your shirt." He's like, "Huh? What?" I said, "Your shirt, I love it." And he said, oh. And it said McCready for president. McCready was his guitarist. I said, "I agree, it's great." He's like, "Oh yeah, you know what, it's just a clean shirt." So I was like, "Great. This is awesome." And I said, "Well, I'm a huge fan, so thank you, I'm gonna go now." Cut to the next day, my boss had given me tickets to go see them with his boyfriend, and he was also a big fan. So we went to go see Pearl Jam that night, and that night I lit a candle after I got home and wrote some big letter about how he'd inspired me and given me a voice and how I played his music at all my little shows here at NC State. And that it really taught me to have a voice myself, and that I really wanted to explore all these areas I was interested in. Wasn't sure what I was gonna do, but I just wanted to be out there, and I think I had something to share and I had something to say, and I appreciated him giving me that voice. The next morning, he said, "So have you, they were playing at Jones Beach. It was a beautiful thing on the water. They had 3 nights there. I'd seen them the first night. Went in the next day. He's like, "So have you had a chance to see us, do the show and whatnot?" I said, "Yes, oh my gosh, I did. I saw it last night, and I'm so inspired. I wrote you this letter." I'd folded it all designy and wrote TO:ED in a very designy way. Handed it to him. He was like, "Oh, I really feel like we're building something here. We have a movement. I think people are really, we're all energetically feeling something." It was very mysterious and wonderful. I then left, and the next day I come up. He'd ordered so much food that there was somebody else with me. She knocked on the door, "Room service," and he opened the door, and then he saw me, and like a child, he scampered to the side of the room and grabbed some piece of paper and then went and stood in his spot in the light. And the other girl said, "I guess I'm gonna go," and she just left. And he said, "I have something for you." I was like, "Oh, what's that?" He's like, I wrote this. Your story really inspired me, and I believe in what you have to say and what you want to do." And then we talked for like 15 minutes. We talked for a long time. By the end, he hugged me, and I took this little note, flipped it, put it in my pocket, and he says in this, "Your ideas about putting yourself out there in the world are the right ones, good and bad. Imagine the possibilities." Thanks for writing, Eddie. So who knew that 20 years later, I'd be standing here in front of you today, accomplishing what I have, not knowing how I would get here, but being very happy that I got here. It's just one in a story of millions, but think about what will be your story. What are you going to do? What are you going to be prepared for when the opportunity comes? Thank you so much.
All right.
Thank you, Scott. So we have time for some questions and answer. And rather than pass around a microphone, I'm just going to ask you to say it as loudly as you can. Scott will paraphrase and answer for the folks online. So, questions?
So, what has been your best method or like way of finding people who resonate with your passions?
That's a great question. First is writing very good job descriptions. So describing not only the skills that somebody needs, but how they see the world, how they might see creating experiences, what kind of things they're passionate about, and really what motivates them. And so we ask a lot of questions in those job descriptions about them and who they might be so that we know if we're going to get along. We also ask at the end of every interview, what's your favorite movie? Or what is the most recent movie you've seen? And just being personal as well will help understand if you're going to get along as humans.
What made you take the jump from leaving your old workplace to start Addison Interactive, and how did you feel during that moment?
I mean, it was crazy scary because we were at a company of 200, and I was going to take maybe 3 other people, and we were going to start this new journey. I didn't get a lot of money from Prince, but I did get enough to basically pay for about 2 or 3 months of runway. The other big thing that I had was my clients at Fox and Warner Brothers had committed to working with me outside of the Cimarron Group. We had grown so fast that we started being slow. We had so many people and hadn't really worked out our processes, and I felt we weren't able to actually get as much done. We were spending a lot of time on admin and not actually building things, and I wanted to get back to building things. So with that commitment from people, both on the client side and fellow colleagues who wanted to go out with me and start this journey, as well as some big clients who said they would back me, I decided to do it. Plus, I had run a business before that, even though it was small, doing those portfolios. So I knew I could run a business. I knew now that I had bigger clients, and I had some really great people who wanted to do it with me. But scary, for sure. Yes?
Hey, so I'm a writer on the side.
Nice.
I have a blog and I'm trying to write a book and all of that. So, but also I write code for a living.
Yep.
In MSCS, right? So creating content online
Mm-hmm.
and writing code for development are 2 very different things.
Mhm.
And I feel like those worlds almost don't intersect, but I'd like them to somehow. So
Yep.
do you have any ideas how, like, of any, let's say, job descriptions or anything that lie in the intersect where both technical and creative skills would be used?
Sure. So the question is, how do you find an intersection between tech and writing code and writing content? I'll tell you that we have multiple people on our team that are writers who don't write code, but they've been writing bots. So if you remember, the first thing that I did was write an interactive story like Zork, which was technically writing a story that also was code. So bots are an interesting thing because you have to anticipate what somebody's going to input and how they might react to the last piece of your actual story. So in that reel, you saw a girl doing a Ouija board. That was a bot that we created that had 700 and something unique responses to questions that parsed grammar. So I had Phil, our head of strategy, who also has 2 degrees in English, join up with a PHP programmer to create all the logic to parse actual questions, figure out how to respond to them, and do that in a fun, entertaining way. We also programmed things to parse questions. It was basically asking a Ouija board anything. So we were like opening the doors to any questions. It said like, who's your favorite Beyonce or Lady Gaga? It would understand that it was comparing 2 things and then would choose one and respond with, Lady Gaga. And people started going nuts over that. But that's a great intersection of those two simulations. So bots are a whole industry among themselves, just text bots. So we used Twitter, Snapchat, Facebook Messenger, and had a website where you could type in any question and it would respond. We've made a lot of bots and actually are known for it in Hollywood.
So when you're interested in so many things, how do you deal with the constant feeling of something else out there might be a better fit?
The question is, when you have so many interests, how do you deal with so many other things that might be interesting? So I did think about putting this into the presentation, but it was already long. But filtering out things and actually being able to say no to things is also healthy. So knowing your limits is a real thing. And I think as I get older, I say no a lot more because now I understand where I am and what I'm doing. But I think when you're young, if you're interested in something, go learn about it because you never know when it's going to come back into your life in another way. But at some point, you got to prune. Oh, hi. Yes.
Do you have any advice for graduating seniors?
In just the most general sense, or any specific ways?
General sense.
Do you have any advice for a graduating senior in computer science? Again, I think a lot of the stuff that I put in here kind of speaks to that, but I think finding your passion and finding people that are aligned with your passions so that you can go together and work with them on creating something that you're passionate about, passion, I think is a great thing. Or going and interning at some place that's already doing something that you have an affinity for and figuring out how computer science can, if they have a computer science edge to them already, or how computer science could make that thing better. In the back.
How do you identify passion in the interview process? Like what stands out to you when a candidate for your?
So the question is, how do I see if somebody is passionate in the interview process? This goes back a little bit to the acting thing, but I see people's enthusiasm and excitement. Sometimes that actually comes out as nerves. If people are nervous, I'm like, oh, they really care. They really care about this. Or if they just keep talking and are really excited and are still relevant to what we're actually talking about and not just jabbering on, then I know they really know their stuff and they're excited to share it. But it is a little tricky. But there's certainly a lot of duds that come through and you're like, oh, they don't really care. I'm not going to entertain this any longer. Yes?
How do you deal with failure? And have you had any projects that didn't go as planned?
Yes, many projects that did not go as planned. How do you deal with failure is one of the biggest things you can learn as an entrepreneur, especially because you're going to fail. It's going to happen. It's how you respond to that that's the biggest thing. I'll share the Katy Perry story because Katy Perry was mentioned at the beginning. We were asked by Sony Music and Universal Music to build an app for her and work with her on building that app that had, a really cool kaleidoscope of song selector. We had really cool behind the music commentary that she wrote about every song. And we were set to release this just before she performed at the Super Bowl. So it was a lot of pressure. We only had 2 months to build this thing. We ended up actually getting it done and submitting it to the App Store, and it got approved. But then they disapproved it because they said we were selling music through an app, and iTunes was the only place Apple wanted to sell music. So I think we must have caused some war between the App Store and iTunes up here with those people. So it went out, and we made some quick adjustments. It went out. I think 1,500 people downloaded it in 45 minutes. So it was like starting to take off. And Capitol Records called and said, we have to pull it. And so we pulled it off 2 days before the Super Bowl. The whole project failed. And we were like, oh my God. So now we've learned, what have we learned from this? Be prepared, have realistic timelines, and get approval early. And go through a lot of QA time and make sure you have that. One of the biggest problems, I think, in places we've failed has been when, as a company, we've taken on requests that are unrealistic. So I think one of those learnings is don't take on requests that are unrealistic unless you are sure you can do it. Yeah.
Scott, maybe just one more question, and I'll tell you how maybe it won't be the last question, but go ahead.
What?
Yes. Yes. What?
Wow, the drama. Again, wait. Okay, yep. Hey, all right. I don't have a... Man, that's a tough one. Gosh, this is a great interview. Why did I just think of Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, the original movie? I don't know. I love that movie. It's a great movie. Gosh. I love any Kubrick movie. Yeah, any Kubrick movie.
All right. Thank you so much, Scott.